The secret to quilting beautiful feather motifs is always to bring it back to the center. Hey, I'm Angela Walters, and welcome to the Fabulous Feathers Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, where over the course of 6 videos, I'm going to show you just how you can use feathers in all areas of your quilts. And in this video, we're going to tackle motifs. Motifs are a self-contained design that can really add an elegant look to your quilt. It's a great way for highlighting bigger blocks or breaking up negative space with beautiful, complex-looking designs that are actually not that difficult to quilt. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do it, give you some tips to make them look perfect, even if they're not, and I'm going to demonstrate how to do it on a long arm and a sewing machine. Plus, I'll show you some different variations so you can find the perfect motif for you. Before we start quilting, let's mark out a motif and learn the basic elements that make it all come together. I'm going to be filling in the triangles of the Fabulous Feathers panel with motifs. And I'm going to start by using my basic 8 stencil to mark out some guidelines. What's really nice about this is if I want to find the center point and where everything radiates from it, I can do that. Or I can position it where I want the center of my motif to be. And I can just use my pounce pad to quickly mark it. All of the motifs I'm going to be showing you have the same basic components, no matter how complex or basic they look. First, I'm going to start with the center of my motif, and this is the part where all the lines will come back together. So using this center line, I'm going to quilt a teardrop kind of shape on the top and bottom. It's almost going to be like a figure 8. Now from the center, I'm going to quilt feathers that go out to the sides. Now the trick here is to get it as symmetrical as possible without worrying about it being perfect. Starting from the center, I'm going to just mark my spine like that. Now that I have the spine there, I'm going to just mark the other side. Now I'm going to start adding my petals on the other side. Now we're going to start with the basic feather motif. So I'm going to just mark some of those basic feather petal shapes on here. Now, of course, you could just freehand those once you have those guidelines, but it's a good practice to go ahead and mark it out so that when you get to quilting, you'll know how it goes together. And it doesn't matter which side of the feather you start with, that's totally up to you. Then, once I come back to the center, I'll echo my way back over and add my petals on the other side. From there, I'll quilt my spine again on the other side and add my petals. So just even marking it out in the way I'm going to quilt it will kind of help it click and kind of help me get a routine down when I start actually quilting it. I want to leave myself a little space around all the edges of the area because I really want it to have room to kind of pop. And once I'm done quilting it, I'll add echoing or other designs to fill in that space. Now when I talk about a motif being symmetrical, I'm not meaning that's exactly the same on both sides. Where this one curves up, I want the other side to do the same. I'm not too worried necessarily that the petals are all the same exact size or that there's even the same number on each side. For the most part, as long as it's the same basic shape, our eyes will see that as perfect and it'll look great. So let's go ahead and try quilting that out. Now that I have my motif all marked and ready to go, it's time to start quilting. And the one thing about motifs is I have to start a new line of quilting at that center to begin quilting it. So we're going to talk about how to start a line of quilting because that is a question that comes up a lot. And I know I want to start right in the center where that figure 8 comes together. So I'm going to position my quilt where that is. So I'm going to pull my bobbin thread up to the top. Holding my top thread in my hand, I will take 1 stitch and I'll go down and up. And what this is doing is just grabbing that bobbin thread for me. So when I lift up my foot and come over and pull, I should have my bobbin thread right there on the top. So now both threads are right there. Then I'm going to put my quilt back into position. Go ahead and put my foot down, and I'm going to hold those threads down with my fingertip just so they don't slip away. And I'm going to take a couple stitches in place, and this is going to kind of secure it for me. And then I'm going to start quilting till I get away from that point, and then I'm going to cut those tails off right at the quilt top. I know that makes some quilters a little nervous, so if you want, you can leave them long and bury them, or you can put like a little dot of fabric glue on the little knot to help secure it. This is how I've always done it, never had any troubles with it. So now that I have it secured, I'm going to start quilting along my lines, quilting my figure 8. And now that I'm away from that center, I'm going to go ahead and trim those flush with the top. And now it's time to start quilting. So I'm going to quilt one side of my figure 8 and then come across and do the other side. Now what's great about quilting motifs is you can embellish this as much as you want. You can create some really fun variations. So at this point, if I wanted to, I could echo inside my figure 8. I could add little swirls. I can do whatever I want, but I'm going to do it while I'm here. I don't want to wait and come back to it later. So I'm going to go ahead and add another little echo on the inside just for funsies. Now that I'm finished with the center, it's time to quilt the 2 sides of my feather. It doesn't matter which one you start with, so I'm going to go ahead and quilt this side by quilting the spine and ending it in that petal. Then it's time to start adding petals to the feather. The markings of this motif are guidelines for us to follow, and guidelines are just that, guides. I'm not freaking out if I'm not perfectly on those marked lines, because I know eventually I'm going to remove the marking and all you're going to see is that beautiful motif. So look ahead, try to keep your line smooth, and don't stress out about hitting those marks perfect. Now it's time to do the other side, just like we've always done with the basic feather, by echoing that spine and adding those petals. Until I come back to the center of my motif. And there I have my first half. Isn't it cute? See, that's not scary at all. It's just a little cute basic feather. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. I don't want you to ever point out your mistakes, but I'm gonna do that because that's my job. When I went to go quilt along the spine, I echoed the wrong side. And so then I have my lines crossing over my marked bit. But my quilting isn't quite matching up with what I marked, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. I know that after I spray that off, we're not gonna even see those marked lines, and it's just gonna look like it's supposed to be that way. Again, quilting that feather, coming back into the center. Let's check it out real quick. Here's my design. I have my figure 8 in the center. I added a little bit of echoing for fun, and I have my 2 basic feathers coming out the other side. Now once I've quilted my motif, I have a little bit of area to fill in. I'm gonna do that by echoing around the motif and adding some filler. Putting that echoing around the motif is just gonna help separate it from the filler and just really help show it off. I'm using about a 1/4 inch echoing because I love running the edge of my foot along the previously quilted line. However, if you didn't want it quite so dense, you could spread those lines out a little bit more. And after I've echoed around it once, I'm gonna continue filling in the area, adding more echo lines or more filler until the whole area is filled in. If I get in a tight spot where I can't add any more echo lines or filler, I'll just trowel along the edge and move on. After I'm finished filling in the area, I'm gonna spray it with water to remove those markings, and I'll have a beautiful, elegant looking motif. Now we're gonna make a custom feather motif. If you remember, the custom feather just incorporates a little bit of traveling to create this really elegant look. The trickiest part about that is not just the traveling, it's knowing how to get back to the center. So let's talk through this design and then we'll quilt it. So I'm gonna just quickly, maybe even mark out that center right there and a line right here. That's kind of where I want my motif to fall. This one's gonna start the same way as a basic feather motif with that figure 8. This could be pointy, this could be curved, doesn't matter. And then it's gonna start with our sides, our spines kind of going out. And I'm gonna quilt my spine. As I'm quilting out here, I'm gonna need to come back to this point so I can add my petals. If you remember, that custom feather builds up from the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and just echo that spine until I get back to that center part. Then I can start adding those custom petals on one side. When I get to the end, I want to do the other side of the feather. I'm going to need to get back to that center again. And this time I'm going to use echoing of the petals to do that. So from this point, I'm going to echo my way back to my starting point, travel back in there so that I can add the next side of my feather. So that's just the one other thing we're gonna have to think about. We're gonna use some echoing to maneuver our way around. If you find yourself in the wrong spot, just ask yourself, where do I need to go? And then how can I get there? So adding those pretty custom petals. And again, I'm out here, so I'm gonna echo to get back to the center. Now on the other side, I'm just gonna mark my spine. Just have that nice registration mark, because we're gonna go quilt this and we'll see how it looks when it comes together. This one's gonna start the same way as a basic feather motif with that figure 8. Then I'm gonna quilt my spine and echo back to the center so I can start adding my petals. I'm gonna quilt it in groups of 2, going out and then coming back. Once I have that first side done, I'm gonna echo my petals back to the center so I can do the other side of my feather. And just like I did before, I'm going to use echoing to work my way back to the center so I can do the other side of my feather. Except this one, I just marked the spine as a registration line, and the rest I'm going to freehand. And as I work my way along, I'm leaving a little bit of space in between the feather and the edge of the block so I can echo my way back to do the other side. Now I'm using contrasting threads so you can really see what I'm doing. However, if you're quilting this on your quilt, you definitely want to use a matching thread color. That's going to let you see the beautiful texture and help hide any imperfections. I'm going to use a registration point of halfway along the longest side. So this will be where all my lines come back to, and I'm going to make my motif about that tall. Then I'm going to quilt a line that arcs out to the top and back. It's basically just a half of a figure 8. And then just like with the other motifs, if I want to add any embellishment, I can do it right here. I could add some echoes or a swirl, really anything I want. Then I'm going to work along the side, adding my petals on one side and then the other, using the custom feather technique. Quilting that petal out, traveling back, and then returning to the spine. I'm not going to come all the way back to the starting point. I'm going to stop as soon as I run into the seam. And I'm going to add a few more until I fill up that half of the block. Once I finish the first side, I'm going to travel back to the center and repeat on the other side. And since I like my motifs to be somewhat symmetrical, I'm going to aim to have the same number of petals on each side. And when I'm done, I have a quick and easy half motif that's really going to draw attention to that area. And just like the other motifs, I'm going to use echoing and a filler design to fill in all those gaps between the motif and the edge of the block. Now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the custom panel I designed for this challenge, go ahead and fill in the areas highlighted in red with the motifs of your choice. You can try a different one in each corner, or pick your favorite and use it in all of them. Now I'm hoping that you're kind of impressed by how easy it is to create beautiful motifs. If you need a little bit more help quilting your motifs, check out the free downloadable tip sheet and quilting diagrams. It'll break down the design so that you can trace over it until it feels comfortable. And if you need just a little bit more help, you can get the expanded resource with even more diagrams and even more tips. And to find all of that, just check out the link in the description box below. I'll be back next week with another video tutorial where we'll learn how to quilt feathers in irregularly shaped areas to create a really cool wow factor. Until then, happy quilting!